Awaken to your truth that you are the I Am presence in harmony with the divine. You are consciousness beyond what the body and mind identify. Your hosts Lynda Hope and Sharon Berkowitz will remind and enlighten you to know your divine nature. You were born into the body already aware, but forgot it as you expanded your sense of identity, ego mind, pattern behaviors, and habits. Stop sleepwalking and wake up to your timeless, eternal, formless self. Now, here are your hosts of Moment to Moment, Lynda Hope and Sharon Berkowitz.
Hello, good evening, and namaste. I am so thrilled to be here with my co-host Sharon Berkowitz, all the way from Austin, Texas. And we're here, and I'm in Chicago. And so we're just excited you're all streaming in here and being a part of this important show, because parents, take out your paper and pencil.
Yes, there's going to be a lot of good information shared today, a lot of integration and awareness. So we're excited that you're joining us today.
Absolutely. And I guess, Sharon, we should say why we're talking about it and what we mean by raising conscious children in an unconscious world. We know what consciousness is on a relative basis.
Why don't you explain to us what unconscious is?
I will. Thank you. Well, unconscious, the unconscious world. Well, we can say it from individuals as being unconscious and also a collective unconsciousness out there. So unconsciousness means that we're built on a set of behaviors and a pattern behavior. And that if all we know ourselves to be is this person with this personal identity and a belief system and states of mind that run the system, if that's all we believe ourselves to be is this body, mind, and identity, that's pretty much patterned, and that's being unconscious.
Because right, that's 100% patterned.
That's 100% right. That's 100% not knowing there's anything else out there but that, and that every thought that comes into your mind, you believe, and it becomes part of your constant stream of consciousness, right? And a lot of unconscious thoughts are running you as well. And sometimes you see your thoughts and sometimes you don't see your thoughts, but most of them are believed. All right, believe practice.
That's your belief system, and what you believe in is actually coming from a conditional state. It's coming from your states of mind. And what we're talking about when we want to talk about beyond that, which is consciousness. So conscious awareness, I like to read from my book, which is Light Wisdom. And here it is right here, Light Wisdom by Sharon Berkowitz. And so cosmic consciousness, for example, it is a term often used to denote a higher or particularly spiritual level of awareness and consciousness. It is said that in a state of cosmic consciousness, the human mind is elevated beyond the awareness of the self and the ego, which is what we were talking about before, which is your belief systems and patterning, and enters a place of oneness as unity. And as Eckhart Tolle says, that consciousness appears to evolve through the awakening process of the seemingly suffering of humanity. Connecting to the field of pure oneness, a rhythmic flow and movement appears as one collective mind, one life expressing itself, appearing as the many. So I just wanted to bring that to our awareness today.
Yes. And so those who are listening in, please take anything that is a distraction and turn it off, because what we are now sharing with you, Sharon here with you, is this present moment. As Eckhart, we talk about Eckhart Tolle a lot, because in this present moment, as we're listening and paying attention, and we are not focused on other things, distractions, our phone or our computer, unless you're listening to us via that. Anything else, please turn off. And we're here to focus our awareness to the topic of how do we raise our children in a unconscious world? How do we elevate them and empower them? And as conscious adults, as parents, that's a good start, because if you are conscious, then you have a much better chance of raising a conscious child, wouldn't you say?
I would definitely say that, because as a parent, if you're coming from an awareness, a true awareness of who you truly are, that means being in harmony, in synchronization with life itself, that there's an automatic connectiveness that happens, that occurs naturally in that balance and harmony of life. So that's from the highest perspective of spirituality, taking that, knowing who you truly are, and just knowing that things will take care of itself. Like as Muji says, it's the great taking care. So we know that from a higher perspective, like the air that we breathe, our lungs takes care of itself. Our heart beats and it takes care of itself. Our senses, breathing, smelling, our sight, touching, that's all, again, taking care of itself.
Right. So life provides life, right? Takes care of life, as he would say. So
Yes.
let's talk a little bit about our experiences, maybe on a 3D level, but that growing up, in our experiences as a child, growing up with parents, I can recall that there was a lot of control on happening, right, from the parent to the child, feeling like I wasn't considered, or feeling like my feelings didn't matter, or my opinion didn't matter so much, and not getting the full attention I felt growing up, especially from my father, who was very busy in his life. I remember calling him on the phone and ask, he was busy on the phone. I would say, "Hey, Dad, how are you?" And he'd go, "Yeah, good, honey. How are you?" "Good." So I tell him about the day, go, "Uh-huh, uh-huh." And as I was talking, it would be, "Uh-huh, uh-huh." Uh-huh. And I realized that he really wasn't listening. It was just, pacifying me. I called up, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. And that had, later in years, had a big impact on my life, because when you don't feel like you're heard, you sort of feel like you're erased in a way. And there's this feeling of not having your voice heard or appreciated, and that you start believing that other people's opinion or advice is better than yours. And then you listen to their advice, and in fact, they sort of impose their advice on you, and sort of really is an injustice, because later on in life, you start to doubt yourself, or you continue to doubt yourself through life, expecting other people to really guide you. So that's one experience that I had as a child. What can you share with us about that?
Well, thank you for sharing that, Hope. It's really interesting, because a lot of fathers, I want to say it, during that time, especially for me, my dad would go to work. He'd be gone all day. He would come home. He would have the newspaper on the table while my mom was making dinner. And by the time dinner was ready, he would clear the newspaper, leave the TV on, because the news would be on at the same time. And then my mother would say sometimes, "Let's turn off the TV so we can enjoy dinner." So we would be as a family having dinner.
Yeah.
But I remember too that, my parents, they worked hard, and I know that they provided very well. But there's also a part that, do they have the compassion? Were they really listening as a child? Did I really feel comforted? Did I really get that? And it really does affect you growing up, because, for example, like Dr. Bruce Lipton says, from the ages of 0 to 7, that you're basically downloading all these programs that you're hearing, and you're in that theta state, like that hypnotic theta state of, learning and growing. And so what did my mom do? Oh, well, that got downloaded into my subconscious, which is where all the programs are stored. What did my dad say? Oh, and how did he handle? What was his response? Well, that got another download. So we're learning all these things at a very young age, and it does affect us growing up into adulthood. Especially, are we being heard at the dinner table? Are we being comforted in a time that we need something? How are we relating to our parents and our peers? So it all is about relationships and about growing together as a family.
Right. And then when you don't have that opportunity to grow together, because you're so busy, like you say, your parents were working. My father was working constantly, come home late. And my mother was really the one that raised us. Fortunately, I had a mother who would sit on my bed at night and say, "How was your day? And how are you?" And so she offered me the opportunity of expressing myself and knowing she cared. And even though she would see that my father didn't have the time to care for me, she would say, your dad loves you very much, even though he doesn't show it maybe. So when I had a wise mother, fortunately. And so it was a mother who would say, you're so creative. You're so much more creative than I am. And I felt in a way that because she shared her mother's story of making her feel very insecure. Her mother was a very domineering woman. And my mom would say she forced herself. She would push me by my back into a crowd of people so I would be more outgoing. And I was and that's what my mother saying. And she was very shy. So her teaching to me was, just put yourself out there. You can do anything. It doesn't matter how old you are, and you can do anything. And so when you get that positive role model, it really empowers you in so many ways, even though your father could be the opposite, or your mother, could be the difference, right? Your mother could be like your father, and your father could be like your mother. But whatever those elements, you're right. If you grow up and you hear those voices in your head as you're growing up, right? And then what do you do when you raise your kid? You mirror that. You become your mother or your father.
What? Is that what people are saying? And that's so true. It's like you can say that about another person, like you just sound just like your father, or you sound just like your mother, or your primary caregiver, right? Or your grandma. And the thing about that is that the person doesn't really recognize that for themselves, but underneath it all, because of our subconsciousness and our programs that have been downloaded over the years, we do take those attributes on. And we do have them come to the surface, and other people recognize that so much easier than we do for ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think that that's why, when we impart in our children the confidence that they need to know their intuition is always right on, that they can rely on themselves for their own internal guidance system. That's so important when you say to raising a child who's self-confident, who can problem solve. Because I think you mentioned, we were talking before the show about suicide going on in this country with young women. And it's always been an issue when I was raising the kids, even those back then where the suicide rate was high among young women. And I think it was because they didn't know how to problem solve effectively. They didn't make choices, healthy choices, and they didn't know that they had a choice in the first place.
Right. And part of it is that they don't really know that process to have that ability to overcome those types of issues that they're faced with. It could be social media. It could be even the parenting skills aren't appropriate. It could be just something that is going on in their life that they weren't able to process genuinely, that there was some issue with connecting with people, that there was a disconnect. And that's why a lot of girls, young girls, they're facing that the suicide is what we talked about, because it's higher than it's ever been. And so if we can direct and help children to be more conscious and live a life where, in a society that is mostly unconscious, that then they have a huge and a better rate of survival, and not just survival, but thriving in the environment and really being the best version of themselves. And so that's what this is about too, is to help young children to become more conscious in an environment that may not be conducive to this.
Right. Absolutely. And I remember asking, was it my mother or my father, I think about something, should I go with my thoughts or should I go with what my heart tells me? And I would ask them that question. And I believe my mother said, go with your heart, go with your heart. And I would sort of think about that. Well, what is my heart really telling me? And can I really trust it? Can I trust my heart to tell me the truth? That's also something that we don't talk about. It's sort of like we don't talk about God in our lives either. We don't talk about how it feels to know that there is something greater than ourselves, or something that is even part of ourselves available to us.
Right. That's the greater power, knowing where we come from, right. Knowing who we truly are, is that source, is that consciousness that is available to everyone, that knowledge is here for all. And when we tune into that and we become in a higher awareness state, we're not just dealing from our minds. We're not dealing from ego. Right. We're dealing more or working on things that are more heart-centered, that come up more naturally, more in a balanced state. But sometimes parents are looking for tools that they could use to help raising their children to be more conscious.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. Yes. I think we sort of touched on a little bit on it, that when we can give them our full attention, one of the things that I wanted to share a little bit before that is the idea of active listening, right? We talked about our parents not paying attention to us that well, that we wanted. Maybe they did, but they thought they were giving us enough attention. But, as little ones, we want more. We want to be heard. We want to be special. It's our ego mind. But yes, the active listening that first of all, I think this is important for parents, right? Active listening. When your child talks to you, parents, give them your full attention. Just don't, turn off the TV. Hey, Mom, I want to talk to you about school. Turn off the TV. Sit down with them and look them in the eye and say, I'm here. I'm present for you. What do you need? And also, if ask them questions afterwards. So you said this to me. What do you mean by that? Don't be so quick to give advice. Don't give so quick, because they don't want advice. They really don't want any advice. They want to be heard. So give them your attention and don't come up with any answers right away. If a thought comes in, because that's what blocks you from really hearing them, is your immediate response. Because you're thinking, oh, I can just tell them and they'll be appeased by that, or whatever, or I have too much to do. I don't really want to, whatever that is that comes into your mind. No, allow them to talk fully get it expressed, how they feel, what they're thinking, and then say, do you want me to, chime in, or do you want me to say anything, or you just want me to hear what you have to say? Because sometimes they don't want you to say anything. They just want you to be, hearing what and feeling that they are heard. And that's the most important part. Do you want to add anything to that, Sharon?
Well, I do, especially when we talk about younger children. Let's say the child is 4 years old. So the idea is to, acknowledge their feelings. Like if they're feeling sad, just don't say, oh, you're okay, honey. No, don't worry about it. You're fine. You can say something like, I realize you're sad. And because sometimes they don't realize that they're having a feeling. They don't understand what feelings are. And then people grow up talking more about a story than they do the feeling. And once they understand that, oh, yes, I'm feeling sad. And then you could redirect them to something more positive, and in a sense that, oh, let's go and play over here, or let's bring out your coloring books, or, let's do something together. We read a story. So, at that age group, that's how you would handle something like that, just being aware of your child and the child knows then that they're being understood, that there's some clarity, that there's some safety in that they realize that the mother cares, or the father cares, or whoever the caregiver is, how the child feels. So I think that's an important relationship having with a young child, rather than say, I'm busy, go away, or I'm on the phone and I'll talk to you later about it. Or you can just say, maybe I'm talking on the phone right now and we can discuss this in just a few minutes. Or you can just say, as I've heard before, when the young child comes to the mother and is wanting something, and the mother would say to somebody else, let me call you back.
Mm-hmm.
So you're giving your undivided attention.
Right.
So I think that that's an important way.
Yeah. And I think for a child to have a mother or father say, wait, you know what? My daughter wants my attention. Can I give you a call back?
Yes.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That child would really feel important. Wow. He's interrupting my call so I can talk to him. Whoa. Yeah. And that's true. And the second I think we were talking about is, that the idea of criticizing your child. One thing that I remember back in the day when I heard an expert say, don't tell your child they're bad. Don't talk to them like they're bad, into the core of who they are. It's just that they made a bad choice. Like say, I'm not happy with the choices that you made. Instead of saying, I'm very disappointed in you. What's come over you, right? That's what I would get from my mother. My mom said, that's not like you. That's not like you to do that. And my response would be, what do you mean it's not like me? What do you mean? What else am I supposed to be like? I couldn't understand that comment. So in a way, it's nothing personal. Don't make them feel like they're bad in the core of who they are, but that they have made a bad choice. And then you talk about the choices. Say, what do you think? How do you think your words, what you just said, can be harmful? Or how can you say something in a more positive way and be that somebody can hear you better? But if if you're nasty, that's not nice. That's not a nice way to go, right? You're not going to have a lot of friends if you're being nasty and you're acting that way. How about we look at it a different way?
Mm-hmm.
How about if you express it this way? Do you think that would be a little bit more friendly, right? So your actions and your way of saying things mean something, and you are responsible for that. And I think that that's important for a parent to not be so critical in a sense that it's hurtful to the child, because then they turn into that kind of parent who's going to be hurtful to their children and say things that are hurtful.
Mm-hmm. And it's also about how you would like to be treated. How is it are they respecting you as a parent? Are you respecting your child? For example, let's say the son doesn't want to brush his teeth, and the mother says, well, I'm going to count to 3 and we're going to be brushing your teeth. And if not, I'm going to carry you and we're going to go brush your teeth. So it's not making the child right or wrong about their choices. Just know that there's that consequence, that there's, okay, if you're not going to do this, I'm going to do it this way. And it's not making them feel bad about their choice, but it's helping them to have some boundaries. It's helping them to know that they're being consistent, that there's something in place that they know that this is what's going to happen. So 1, 2, and then the child starts walking to the bathroom to brush his teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Because he knows that otherwise I'm going to be carried in, and not that one choice is right or wrong. It's just that that's what's going to happen.
Right. It's like also when you want them to go to sleep, for instance, and they're younger and they say, no, I'm not going to sleep. I know that we talk about children, even when they're first born, that they've got your number, right? They've got your number. My daughter knew exactly, I breastfed her, and every hour and a half there it was, and if I didn't come right in there. So we're in control. They're controlling us from the beginning of their life. and and just with our crying and the, you know, and also karmically, you know, I'm sure because we're supposed to have had a relation, right? Before the child came, we made an agreement from a higher perspective that we are, as parents, have a contract with this child, and this child has a contract with us. And they're going to learn these life lessons. They're all ready to do that because they know, having experienced lifetime after lifetime with different sets of parents, that this lifetime, you're going to be the parent that shows them X, Y, and Z. You're going to teach them, or maybe something that'll totally wake them up to their I am presence. I mean, maybe this is the life that they get off the karmic wheel with you. You know, that would be great. But they've got your number and they're going to push your buttons. And so, you know, when it's time to go to bed and they're saying 5 more minutes, and you're going non-negotiable, there's a way of saying it or doing it that doesn't torment them any further than they're already being, you know, they're being restricted. So you want to be as patient and as calm and consistent as possible.
Mm-hmm. You know, and as a baby, though, like we were just talking about, that there are certain basic needs that need to be met. And as a baby, they're letting us know through crying or pointing, you know, that they either need a diaper change or they're like going like this because they're hungry, they want food. You know, they could use sign language, or they need to be picked up. And so they have basic needs that are met. And then as they get older, it's just like what are they noticing about us? How are we responding? Like, what are we doing in that moment? You know, for example, if something happens and the child sees, how does the parent react to somebody not showing up when they were supposed to? Oh, well, you know, they had something going on, and not to get angry about it. But if they did get angry, it's like noting that, but not holding on to it, not being so triggered that you're holding on to these states of mind or these feelings, and seeing how you process life, how you process your emotions. And that's what the child is going to pick up on. That's what they're going to learn. And in a conscious society, you know, this is what we want to have for our children too, is a more conscious way of looking at things, processing, seeing how that they can work in the world and be in the world, but just effortlessly, seeing things and knowing what they're doing, but from a more heartfelt, conscious state of being.
And when you were mentioning that about your actions, you know, yes, children are very, very astute, and they just soak it right up. And I
we
remember
know more than we may
know more. Yes,
that they know.
And the one thing that I learned about myself that I'm very grateful that my mother demonstrated this was she didn't get panicked during a catastrophe or an emergency. I remember this, my brother was swinging on a drape. I forget, we were pretty young, but my brother was swinging from bed to bed, holding onto a drape. You know, so he's swinging on the drape, and then he gets to the other side and he's swinging back. And then guess what happened? The drape broke.
Really? Okay. That's what happens.
That's what happens. And the drape, and he falls to the ground with his arm behind his back, breaking his arm. And he's crying, and my mother comes running in, and she was amazing. I noticed how calm she was, even though it could have been really traumatic. But she said, oh, you know, got him up, got him to the hospital, and I just noticed how you know, witnessing that experience was really important, because later on I was able to see that yes, indeed, it's important to be calm in an emergency so that you can see it and take care of it and not panic about it.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my mother, you know, she was an RN, a registered nurse. And so I would see her in all kinds of situations. You know, she would be so helpful. She would come to events at school, and she would be the nurse's station. You know, she volunteered to be the nurse, and plus she worked later when I think it was in 8th grade, and she went back to work during the day when we were in school. And so, I noticed that, how they handled situations, like even though it was an emergency, but she was calm and she handled it very well. And so that's what we're noticing. We notice how our parents respond to different situations. For example, though, too, if your child is yelling, let's say, and having a tantrum and all upset about something, and you know that that's not a good place to be discussing something with them,
Right.
And so, working through something like that, either like we were talking about earlier, being in a restaurant, and do you let the child keep crying, or do you remove and walk out of the restaurant with your child? So I know some people may not even go into a restaurant for those reasons. But as an adult, talking to your adult child, let's say, and they get upset with you or they're yelling, that, you can talk to them levelly and say, and lovingly, that, this is not a good time to be discussing this until we're both at the right level to be discussing it, more calm and balanced. Because otherwise it's like trying to discuss something with an alcoholic or someone who's drunk, that, where's it going to really take you until you can discuss things and meet them at that level. But if one person is trying to be understood and the other person says, well, let me show you what I know, and now I'm going to make you understand where I'm at. Well, there's that mismatch right there.
Right.
So there has to be some kind of give and take, and that's what this life is here too, is just recognizing yourself and what you're seeing and hearing in another person. Because really what you're saying, and we talked about this too, when you say something about another person, who you're really talking to, who are you talking about? It's yourself.
Right.
And so if we take it to that higher level of consciousness, of conscious awareness, it's like, what are we showing ourselves? What are we really wanting to look at? So by looking deeper within and looking at it from that conscious awareness.
Right. Absolutely. And exactly. When people are in conflict with each other, it's usually two egos going at it. Right. It's an ego battle. Who's going to be right and who's going to be wrong? Well, if you both have strong egos, which you probably do if it's the mother, daughter, or the son, or whatever, and all you can want to do is be right, there's no conversation. Nobody's listening to each other. And you as a parent need to wake up in that moment and allow that person to talk, and you be still. You be in your higher truth, that you are just the witness of this conversation beyond that ego mind, and allow that person to just express themselves in any way that is. Now, like you say, if that person's being, disrespectful and attacking you in any way, then you can, through your awareness and consciousness, say in an even more firm voice, that is not acceptable behavior. And say, I am not going to sit here and listen to that. And then you leave. Or that person may just be so angry at you for not responding the way they want you to respond, which is probably yelling back at them, because they're going, you could be sitting there with a smile on your face going, yeah, that's the ego playing out. Isn't that interesting? Because what you realize, it's not the child or the person that's yelling at you or trying to put you down that is off. It's the ego mind that's possessing them in the moment. Because the person in front of you is just like you, full of love and light. That's their truth. That's really who they are. But they're just being overwhelmed or overcome by their unconscious pattern behavior that seems to be winning right now. And they're feeling pumped up, and superior to you. And that's all they know.
Right.
So they're conscious in that moment. And so you really have to know that they're unconscious, and maybe through your stillness and non-reactivity to it, they may even slow down and realize, wow, what did I just do? I went off on a tangent. I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm very sorry. And maybe catch themselves. I've had that happen with other people in that respect. I've had my brother in one moment realize that he was going off and saying, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really important too, is to even have that awareness as you're speaking, like, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
How could I say that? Or I'm sorry, I just realizing it. So it's like, awakening in that moment, like you woke up in that moment, like, oh, and that there's something that lit up inside you to say, oh, wait a minute, now from the higher truth and higher awareness, I could say that now, oh, that wasn't right. Or, I didn't mean to say that. Or, you could even apologize if you get angry at your child. You can even say that afterwards, like, oh, I'm sorry that, I got angry in that moment. And so that you're taking full responsibility for your own actions and your own feelings that are coming forward, and, you want to not hide your feelings, or you want to have an awareness that letting your feelings come out, but yet recognizing too in the moment that, oh, I'm sorry for my anger, or I didn't mean for it to go that way. And, so you're recognizing that about yourself, and the child is seeing how you're responding to it. Like, oh, okay. And again, that's loving yourself. It's loving and respecting yourself and others in that moment.
Exactly. And if we're not coming from the place of love, we're coming from the place of fear, because that's all there is, right? In a duality, in this 3D reality, we live in duality. And so when we identify as the person and make things right or wrong, and criticize our children based on an old pattern behavior or what our parents raised us to believe in that moment, like, when you do this, you're wrong. If you do this, then you're right. Or if you agree with me, you're right. If you don't agree with me, you're wrong, which is, a very typical thing in a family dynamic, so they're like building alliances between siblings, and you divide yourself out when you do that. You separate yourself in the conversation when you take sides. And a lot of families do that. They take sides, they team up. They feel, oh, you're teaming up against me. It's not fair. You're agreeing with each other. And that's the funny part of it, because just because you agree doesn't mean that, but the ego doesn't see it that way. The ego says, if you don't agree with me, you're not my friend. That's a problem with the ego. Instead of saying, you know what, you have your opinion and I have my opinion, and there's neither right or wrong. It's based on an experience or a feeling that I have and something that I feel is important to me. I don't impose it on you, nor do I want to impose it on you. So in a family dynamic, wouldn't that be great if people could sit around in a family and have a beautiful discussion and be open from a place of your heart and say, you know what, that's great if you don't understand that. And I love you unconditionally. I love whatever it is about you. And you are free to say whatever you want to, as long as we're coming from a place of appreciation for each other and trust in each other.
And that's a great point. I love what you just said, and knowing about unconditional love. But a lot of times in families, they grow up with conditional love.
Right.
Like, I'll love you if you go to this school, or I'll love you if you come with us to this event, this family event. And if you don't, they're not going to be happy with you. Or you can take a test and there's 100 questions on the test. You get one wrong. And they say, well, why did you get that one wrong?
Yeah.
How could you mess up on that? So now all you're thinking about is that one question, and you did very well, but not from their point of view. So it's from their perspective.
Right.
Now it's not about the test anymore, but it's really about how you feel and how they provoke something within you to get either frustrated or upset about something. And it wasn't even about that test anymore or about anything. It was really coming down to the feeling that you got from that situation.
Yes.
And so this way we want to create healthy boundaries as well.
Right. Well, I think you are also discussing Alex Howard,
Yes.
who has 3 emotional needs, and we're going to talk about it. So we do have a commercial break to honor our sponsors. So parents, get your pencil and paper out if you haven't already, because we're going to talk about those 3 core emotional needs. We'll be right back, listening to Moment to Moment.
Stay with us.
Looking for a holistic solution? Look no further than LimestreetWellness.com. Lime Street Wellness is a full-service Reiki therapy center offering in-person and distant Reiki sessions. Additionally, Lime Street Wellness is committed to helping clients co-create healthier outcomes with hypnosis, QHHT, and intuitive advice. Lime Street Wellness is committed to helping all that are seeking to co-create better health, peace of mind, and greater freedom. Reiki Master Kevin Mackey uses energy medicine, hypnosis, mindfulness, and intuitive guidance to assist in uncovering, understanding, and removing any blocks or energy cords or mental mindsets that may be intruding and causing needless suffering. Visit Lime Street Wellness today at LimestreetWellness.com. That's LimestreetWellness.com.
Oh, welcome back.
Hi, welcome back, everyone.
Listening to Moment, I'm Lynda Hope.
And I'm Sharon Berkowitz.
Yes, we're here together here from Austin, Texas and Chicago, Illinois. And we hope that you've been listening to some of the important information that we're sharing about how to be an effective parent and to raise conscious children in an unconscious world. So maybe there's some pointers that we can, point your way into who you really are, first and foremost, and to the awakened presence that you are the truth. And you are already that. And that if you know who you really are, then you're the greatest version of yourself. And not only are you going to be functioning in the world in love and light and harmony, but your effectiveness and your presence in your child's life is going to elevate and inform them as to who they really are as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about Alex Howard. Tell us about the 3 core emotional needs, Sharon.
Sure, absolutely. So he has 3 core emotional needs. And the first one is about safety. It's really being, some predictability, consistency, absence of violence in the home, absence of chaos. And what happens is that if there's not that level of safety, you feel like your world isn't safe. You feel like, okay, if the mother who feared for her own safety, how does that make you feel as a child? So you want to know, how does this make you feel now as an adult? Where do you stand on that? So it's understanding what has happened to yourself, learning how to self-regulate your body, your system. In other words, how do you deal with stress? How are you dealing with overwhelm? Is this world a safe place for you now? And even if it's not, how do you respond? So it's how you respond to things that you notice that really affects you, because things happen in the body. Like the body is like a really good tool that shows you what is going on with your mind, your body mind. Now remember, from the highest perspective, that it's an illusion, right? That we live in a world of mythia, that the only thing real is love. Love is all there is, and everything else is projected upon and showing us that our vulnerability and where we can awaken that this is the dream, awaken from that, from the illusion of the dream. So, but in the meantime, when we're growing up as a child, we're learning to be conscious in an unconscious society. How are we responding? What is our feelings? Like, if we can recognize those feelings, that how we can be feeling safe. Do you really feel safe?
And, sometimes your parents, raise their voice, right? And I remember as a child not feeling safe.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my bedroom was over I realized this years later why I had a problem with that. I was over the garage. My room was over the garage, and my father would come home late, and the garage door would open up, and there would be a sound, and I was very sensitive to sound, and so it would scare me a little. And so the feeling of being scared and having my father come home. Now that was interesting, because it's not about my father. It's about having that scary feeling of that sound and then my father coming in. So it was sort of like I attached the feeling of being scared with my father. And so I didn't realize that until I was able to really dissect it and say, yeah, that scared me a little bit. And now my father's home. And so I was projecting that my father's a scary person and that I should be scared of him. And so we see things in a way that a lot of it's unconscious. And so our reaction in that moment could be, oh, I don't want to talk to my dad. He scares me. But he didn't do anything. He didn't say anything. It was just that noise, right? And so we have to be, when we look at go inside and really consider how we're feeling in the moment and bring it up. And if anything does come up, we can release it or let it go and say, those are our projections. We have projections when we have experiences in our life. But we can let it go. We can, in a 3D world, we can let it go. We don't have to attach ourselves to it anymore, because right now in this present moment, there's nothing to be afraid of. There's no fear. Everything is perfect. And that's what higher knowing is, where everything is taking care of everything. Everything that you're experiencing in this moment is divine.
Mm-hmm.
From a higher.
It's perfectly perfect,
Exactly.
the way it's happening, and it's not supposed to be any different.
Right.
But it's also about, your own experience, why you're here. What is the point? What is the purpose of that? Of what you're doing and what you're saying. And when we can understand that it's really for our awakening. Like if our child was sick, for example, and they didn't go through that illness, then as a parent, you wouldn't be putting this organization together, this group to support that illness, or, you wouldn't come to do certain activities with your child if it wasn't for that illness. So somehow being grateful for whatever is in the moment, because like you said, it is perfect in the moment. Right. And so that's what we also would like to take a look at.
Right. But you said there are 3 core emotional needs, one being safety, and the other 2 you said are love and boundaries that Alex Hoffman was talking about. And you mentioned a little bit about love in that, love is an interesting concept, because we do use it conditionally, unfortunately, in many relationships, in that if you are, my expectation of you is X, Y, and Z, and if you don't meet those expectations, I don't love you anymore. Or, what is it? Love languages, the 5 love languages, service, affirmations, gifts, so you have to be a certain love type. So the funny thing is, if you give me gifts and my love language is X, affirmations, then I'll miss that love that you were supposed to give me. That's sort of silly. I think that whole thing is silly, because it's all conditional. It's all saying, you have to be a certain way and you have to relate to me in a certain way, and then I'll show you love, or I'll control you with my love. I'll take it away and see how you like it, which is very controlling. But love,
from
right?
a consciousness perspective, though, of love,
Right.
It's like how you treat your child. Like, are you trying to understand their inner world? Are
Sure.
you recognizing their needs, or are you ignoring their needs? Are you able to help them? What happens when that child grows up? Are they shutting down or turning people away because they didn't have that feeling of love that they would get from others, especially their caregivers? So it's also really important to understand that, from 0 to 7, as we talked about earlier, that those are the growing years. That's like the hypnotic state, the theta state, that they're really getting the information, how you respond to things, how people are supposed to do things. And in that sense, though, as an adult, how do we, change that for ourselves if we want to help people, be of service to others? Is that showing, more what love is, and how we can help ourselves and still be nurturing our own self as well? And subconsciously working on those programs. Some people say, well, you could use headphones, or, this is some of the tools that you could do. You could dissolve your states of mind, like anger, frustration, resentment, blame, shame, guilt, dissolving all those. So it's something that you can do, but also from the higher perspective is that none of that really exists. That from the highest perspective, looking at it from very high consciousness, cosmic consciousness, like we talked about earlier, it's beyond the personal identity, beyond the ego mind. So recognizing who you truly are, that just will help everything to fall into place. And it's not like you have to fix or do something, but at times, you do have to, chop wood and carry water and not paint it pink, where, you just kind of ignore it. But yet you just know that there's a trust, that there's a knowing that it will work itself out in a quiet stillness space.
Right. And I know I'm looking at our time. We have about 7 minutes left. And so I think what we want to do is maybe go over some important points or tips, again, of what parents can do to help their child be more conscious in the world of the unconscious. So I would say that if I, looking back on the way I was raised, if my mother were to say to me, you have all the answers, all you have to be is still and quiet and tune into your heart. And if she were to would have imparted that to me, that wisdom, that would have been very powerful.
And you can say too, let's sit together with this. Let's just relax in the moment. Let's see what comes up. Let's see, just be quiet and still. Mm-hmm. And like you said, just relax in the moment, and then just take it from there. Another technique would be personal writing. Let's say you can grab a piece of paper or on your computer, and let's say there are people that are frustrating to you. For example, for me, when I was at work, and it wasn't about work, it was about I was on a bowling team through work, and there were other teams, and I had a tiff with a couple of other members, another team. And one day, and it kept getting worse, and I just thought, okay, what can I do about it? So I just started writing on the computer. I wrote all the things, why I was upset, how I felt, the situations. But writing about that helped me to get through that. And then I deleted it. Or if you're writing it on a piece of paper, you could just tear it up into a million pieces. But what I realized is that I got it out. I was able to express it. And from that moment on, when I went back and I saw them, nothing bothered me about it anymore. It just kind of dissipated. It just went away. And I was just starting to talk with them, and we got to be friends. And then one day they said, do you want to go to lunch? Mm-hmm. So it just kind of transpired. Everything just moved into a gentle space of not pushing or fixing or doing anything. It was just, I changed. I transcended what was happening for me in that time frame. As a young child, what they can do is they can go ahead and scribble on their papers and really hard, or they could go and punch a pillow, or, they could, take it out in other ways like that. They're more constructive, what you consider as a parent to be constructive to help your child to get through something.
Right.
So it's also about following through, with children, for example. I want to just, talk about the boundaries. That was the third one.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like, are you sticking to 8 p.m. at night? They go to sleep, and you're being consistent with that. Maybe allowing on the holidays or the weekends to sleep a little bit later if they choose, but you're being consistent, so you're setting good boundaries, healthy boundaries for your child and following through with it. So one more quick example is that parents were going to have a sleepover for the kids, and they were getting really excited about it. But the child that they were having the sleepover at wasn't behaving properly in a certain way for something. And the parents said, if this behavior doesn't change, we're going to cancel the sleepover party. And what happened was the child did not change the behavior. So the parents canceled the party, and they called the other parents of the children, let them know. And the parents were actually grateful that the parents were consistent and that they were, still disciplining in a way that, they're following through. So follow through is just really, really important with children.
Right. Consistency, particularly. Yes. It's like raising a dog in a way, right? The dog is very happy when you're consistent and you heel them and knows to sit and beg and do all that. They know where they stand with you, but they don't know where they stand. They can't stand. It's like, we don't have a leg to stand on because they can't. One thing I do want to mention is this wonderful phrase that I think Eckhart Tolle says, or is it Muji? He says, we're not really experiencing our suffering. We're suffering our experiencing. And so when an experience happens, another point that I think that we can all relate to is a parent can say, what did you experience today in school? And the child can just simply say, this girl came up to me and hit me, or something happened, and you can express it. But then you don't have to create a story around it. You don't have to create any energy around it. The child can express it, and you hear it, and then you move on. But you don't continue to regurgitate it or build drama around it and make it a part of your identity about it. And that, I think, is important. And that's the kind of conversation we could be talking about all day, because that's what people tend to do, is making all the stories about it. They'll tell about your life, my life, and how I suffered and how I was this and that. Instead, it happened. It happened. Move on. Move on. And just, and in that moment, another beautiful thing unfolds.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree with that. That is really, really important to know that just let go of the stories. We don't have to be holding on to the story. We don't have to, make it always mean something or tell somebody a story to get them involved and share the drama with them. And then they get riled up, and, we can just, let it be, and move on.
Exactly. And it's parents, and we only have, we're really out of time right now, but we do appreciate everybody. We're going to continue this conversation in a future show, Sharon, right? This is a lot of information that we went through. But for those who are interested, please let us know that you appreciate and that you want this show to continue at another time, because being a parent, I think, is the hardest thing you can ever do in your lifetime. And for those, thank you, Sharon, for being a co-host with me.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lynda Hope. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be with you on the show and sharing this wonderful information. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Yes, thank you. And you're listening to Moment to Moment, and we'll see you next week.
Take care now.
The truth is here and now on WLTK-DB Talk Radio at WLTK-DB.com.